The morning mist clung to the towering pines of the Cascade Mountains as Jack Morrison adjusted his weathered hiking pack, breathing in the crisp Washington air that had become his sanctuary. The former Marine had made this trek to his grandfather's old cabin dozens of times over the past 2 years, each journey a pilgrimage of sorts, a way to quiet the memories that still echoed from distant battlefields. Beside him, Max, his German Shepherd companion, stood alert and ready, his dark coat gleaming with dewdrops from the morning fog. The dog had been Jack's constant companion since leaving the service, a bond forged not just through training, but through shared understanding of duty, loyalty, and the weight of protecting others. This particular morning felt different somehow, charged with an energy that Jack couldn't quite place, though he attributed it to the approaching storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Max's ears twitched at sounds only he could hear, his intelligent brown eyes scanning the familiar trail ahead with unusual intensity. Jack checked his watch, noting they were right on schedule for the 3-hour hike to the remote cabin where his grandfather had once taught him about the wilderness, about respect for nature, and about the quiet strength that comes from solitude. The trail stretched before them, winding through ancient Douglas firs and over granite outcroppings, a path Jack could walk blindfolded after so many journeys. Yet today, something felt different. Something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up in a way that reminded him of those tense moments before an operation overseas. They had walked barely half a mile when Max suddenly froze mid-step, his entire body going rigid as if he'd hit an invisible wall. Jack's boot scraped against a loose rock as he stopped abruptly, watching his dog with growing concern as Max's ears pinned back against his skull, a low, almost inaudible growl rumbling deep in his chest. The German Shepherd's nose twitched rapidly, analyzing scents that Jack's human senses couldn't detect, his powerful frame trembling slightly with contained energy. Jack had seen this behavior only once before, 2 years ago during one of his worst PTSD episodes, when nightmares had blurred the line between past and present, and he'd found himself barricaded in his apartment, convinced enemies were closing in. Max had planted himself between Jack and the door that night, refusing to move despite Jack's increasingly agitated commands, his presence a steady anchor that had slowly pulled Jack back from the edge of a complete breakdown. The dog had stayed motionless for hours, his eyes never leaving Jack's face, somehow knowing that movement or distraction could shatter the fragile thread holding Jack's sanity intact. Now, seeing that same unwavering focus, that same protective stance, Jack felt his pulse quicken as his military training kicked in, automatically scanning the surrounding forest for threats his conscious mind hadn't yet identified. Max's gaze was fixed on a point roughly 30 yards ahead and slightly to the right, where the trail curved around a massive boulder, his nostrils flaring as he processed information that remained invisible to human perception. Jack knelt beside his companion, placing a steady hand on Max's neck, feeling the tension coiled in every muscle like a spring ready to release. The rational part of his mind argued for continuing their planned route, dismissing the dog's behavior as perhaps a reaction to wildlife, maybe a bear or cougar that had crossed the trail during the night. But the deeper part of Jack, the part honed by years of trusting his gut in life or death situations, recognized something more significant in Max's alert posture. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory, words spoken during their last conversation before the old man's death. "This land has secrets, Jackie, and sometimes it tries to tell you things if you're willing to listen." The cabin ahead held decades of memories, photographs of his grandfather's younger days, journals documenting his experiences as a park ranger, and the peaceful solitude that had become Jack's refuge from a world that often felt too loud, too chaotic after everything he'd seen overseas. Yet Max remained motionless, his professional training as a military working dog combining with natural instincts to create an early warning system that Jack had learned to trust implicitly. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the usual chorus of birds and small animals notably absent, as if nature itself was waiting for something to unfold. In those crucial 5 seconds, Jack watched Max break from his frozen position and deliberately step off the main trail, moving with purpose toward a narrow deer path that disappeared into a thicket of understory vegetation. The German Shepherd paused just long enough to look back at Jack, his eyes conveying a message as clear as any spoken command. "Follow me, trust me. There's something you need to see." Jack's military training warred with his desire for routine, for the predictable comfort of their planned destination. But the bond between him and Max had been forged in moments exactly like this, when split-second decisions could mean the difference between safety and disaster. Without fully understanding why, Jack shouldered his pack and followed his 4-legged partner into the unmarked wilderness, leaving behind the familiar trail that led to his grandfather's cabin. Max moved with the confidence of a scout, his nose constantly working, his ears swiveling to catch sounds from multiple directions as he led them deeper into terrain that Jack had never explored, despite his many visits to the area. The deer path was barely visible, winding between moss-covered logs and around clusters of ferns that brushed against their legs, the canopy overhead so thick that the morning light filtered down in scattered beams like nature's own spotlight. The forest floor beneath their feet transitioned from the packed earth of the established trail to a carpet of fallen needles and decomposing leaves that muffled their footsteps to near silence. Max's pace had settled into a steady, purposeful rhythm, his body language indicating they were heading toward something specific, rather than simply exploring randomly. Jack noticed the subtle changes in vegetation, the way certain plants grew in patterns that suggested water sources nearby, and the fresh scratches on tree bark that indicated recent animal activity. His grandfather had taught him to read these signs during their hiking adventures, lessons that had seemed like games at the time, but now felt like crucial survival knowledge. After 20 minutes of following the deer path, Max suddenly stopped again, his nose working overtime as he analyzed a complex mixture of scents that hung in the still air. Jack crouched beside him, studying the ground around them with eyes trained to notice details that civilian hikers might miss, and immediately spotted the signs that confirmed his growing suspicions. Tire tracks pressed into the soft earth. Definitely recent, definitely human, and definitely out of place in this supposedly pristine wilderness area. The tracks were wide, suggesting a heavy vehicle, possibly an ATV or small truck, and they led away from the deer path toward what appeared to be a natural clearing visible through the trees ahead. Max's continued alert behavior told Jack that whatever had made these tracks was likely still in the area, still representing a potential threat that had triggered every instinct the German Shepherd possessed. Jack felt his heart rate increase as he realized they had stumbled upon something that was meant to remain hidden, something that could explain Max's unusual behavior and the strange energy he'd sensed that morning. Following the tire tracks with Max leading the way, Jack began to notice other signs of recent human activity that painted an increasingly troubling picture of what they might discover ahead. Broken branches at shoulder height indicated people had pushed through the undergrowth recently, and the disturbed vegetation showed patterns of repeated passage rather than a single trip. Max's nose remained close to the ground, following a scent trail that seemed to energize him with each step, his tail held high in the focused manner of a working dog who had found what he was searching for. The natural clearing opened before them suddenly, revealing a scene that made Jack's military training snap immediately into high alert. A sophisticated camp setup with expensive equipment, multiple sleeping areas, and the kind of organization that spoke of a semi-permanent operation. Camouflaged tarps covered what appeared to be storage areas, and Jack counted at least 6 different stations that suggested this was no ordinary camping expedition. His eyes cataloged details automatically: solar panels for power, professional-grade communication equipment, and the telltale signs of a group that had been operating here for some time. Max circled the perimeter of the camp, his nose working constantly, gathering information that would have taken Jack hours to collect through visual observation alone. The German Shepherd's behavior indicated that people had been here recently, possibly within the last few hours, and that they might return at any moment. Jack pulled out his phone to document the scene, but found no signal in the remote location, a fact that both isolated them from help and explained why this spot had been chosen for whatever illegal activity was taking place here. The evidence of criminal activity became undeniable as Jack moved closer to examine the camp's contents, with Max maintaining a protective position that allowed him to watch for approaching threats while Jack investigated. Under one of the larger tarps, Jack discovered plastic bags containing what was clearly illegal drugs, scales for measuring quantities, and packaging materials that indicated a significant distribution operation. Maps spread across a makeshift table showed various locations throughout the Cascade Mountains, marked with symbols that suggested a network of similar camps or drop points throughout the wilderness area. Jack's military experience with intelligence gathering helped him recognize the sophistication of the operation. This wasn't a small-time group, but rather a well-funded organization using the remote wilderness as a staging area for drug trafficking. The environmental damage was immediately apparent, with chemical containers scattered around several areas, spilled substances that had killed vegetation in unnatural patterns, and waste disposal methods that showed complete disregard for the pristine ecosystem his grandfather had spent his life protecting. Max's continued alertness suggested that the immediate threat hadn't passed, that the people responsible for this operation were likely to return, possibly soon. As Jack continued his careful documentation of the camp, he attempted to contact help using his radio, finally managing to reach Pete Williams, a longtime forest ranger whose familiar voice provided a welcome anchor of authority in the increasingly surreal situation. Pete's response confirmed Jack's worst fears. There had been reports of unusual activity in the remote areas of the Cascades, including the disappearance of Maria Santos, an environmental scientist who had been investigating illegal dumping in the region 3 days earlier. Maria's family had reported her missing after she failed to return from what was supposed to be a day hike to collect water samples from several mountain streams, and search teams had been unable to locate any trace of her despite extensive efforts. Jack's discovery of the drug operation suddenly took on more sinister implications, as Pete explained that Maria had been specifically investigating environmental crimes in areas that matched the locations marked on the maps spread across the criminal's table. The ranger's voice carried a mixture of relief at finally having a lead in Maria's disappearance and concern for Jack's safety, as Pete explained that the nearest backup was at least 3 hours away due to the remote location and difficult terrain. Jack found himself facing a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier: continue with his peaceful morning hike and wait for professional help to arrive, or take action based on the growing certainty that Maria was in immediate danger and that every minute of delay might be critical. Max's behavior provided additional confirmation that something was urgently wrong, as the German Shepherd had begun showing signs of agitation that suggested he could detect human distress nearby, possibly Maria's location. The bond between Jack and his dog had been built on trust and mutual understanding, and Max's insistence on leading him away from the familiar trail now revealed itself as something far more significant than animal instinct. Pete Williams's voice crackled through the radio static as he provided Jack with crucial background information that transformed their accidental discovery into a potential rescue mission, with implications reaching far beyond a single missing person. Maria Santos wasn't just any hiker, but a respected environmental scientist whose research had been focusing on illegal activities that threatened the watershed system feeding several major rivers. Work that had apparently made her a target for people willing to use violence to protect their criminal enterprise. The ranger explained that Maria's research had documented systematic environmental damage throughout the Cascades, with particular attention to areas that were supposed to be protected wilderness, but showed signs of illegal dumping, drug manufacturing, and habitat destruction. Her disappearance had coincided with threats received by other environmental researchers in the region, suggesting a coordinated effort to silence anyone investigating the illegal activities. Jack realized that the camp they had discovered was likely just one node in a larger network of criminal operations, and that Maria's scientific work had brought her dangerously close to exposing the full scope of what was happening in the mountains he considered sacred. Max's continued agitation and his obvious desire to lead them away from the camp toward deeper wilderness reinforced Jack's growing conviction that the German Shepherd could sense Maria's location and understood the urgency of the situation better than any human analysis could provide. The weight of decision pressed down on Jack as he considered his options. Wait for professional help that might arrive too late, or trust in the partnership that had carried him through the darkest moments of his post-military adjustment, and follow Max toward whatever danger and opportunity lay ahead in the uncharted wilderness. Max's urgency became impossible to ignore as he began moving toward a ridgeline that rose sharply from the hidden camp, his powerful legs carrying him up the steep terrain with the sure-footed confidence of a mountain goat. Jack followed, his military training automatically assessing the tactical advantages of higher ground, while his hiking experience helped him navigate the treacherous footing of loose shale and exposed granite. The German Shepherd paused frequently to ensure Jack could keep pace, his intelligent eyes constantly scanning their surroundings for threats while his nose continued gathering information from air currents that carried scents from valleys and ridges miles away. As they climbed higher, Jack began to understand Max's strategy. The dog was leading them along a route that provided maximum concealment while offering glimpses of the terrain below, where additional camps or structures might be hidden among the dense forest canopy. The first sign of human presence came as a flash of movement caught Jack's peripheral vision, a figure in camouflage clothing positioned at what was clearly a lookout point, about 200 yards to their east. Jack immediately dropped to a crouch, his marine training taking over as he assessed the tactical situation, noting the guard's position, equipment, and field of observation. Max had frozen the moment Jack stopped, his body language indicating he too had detected the threat, though his superior senses had likely identified the guard's presence long before Jack's eyes confirmed what they were facing. The realization hit Jack with sobering clarity. This wasn't just a drug operation, but a military-style organization with professional security measures, which explained both the sophistication of their wilderness camps and the fate that had likely befallen Maria Santos when she stumbled upon their activities. Using hand signals learned during countless military operations, Jack directed Max to follow a concealed approach that would take them around the guard's position while maintaining visual contact with the valley below. The German Shepherd's training kicked in seamlessly, his movements becoming nearly silent as he navigated through undergrowth that would have challenged even experienced soldiers. Jack's admiration for his canine partner grew with each step, watching how Max instinctively chose paths that minimized noise while maximizing concealment, his natural abilities enhanced by the tactical training that had made him such an effective military working dog. As they moved parallel to the ridgeline, Jack began to see the full scope of what they were facing. Multiple guard positions, communication equipment, and what appeared to be a central structure hidden in a natural depression about half a mile from their current position. The organization's security was impressive, but not impenetrable, revealing gaps and patterns that Jack's military experience helped him identify as potential weaknesses. Max seemed to sense Jack's analytical process, pausing whenever Jack needed time to study the terrain ahead or assess the movement patterns of the guards they could observe. The bond between them had evolved beyond simple companionship into something resembling the partnership Jack had shared with fellow Marines during combat operations. A wordless communication based on trust, shared purpose, and mutual understanding of the stakes involved. Through his binoculars, Jack could make out details of the central structure that confirmed his worst fears about Maria's fate, and he felt the familiar weight of responsibility that came with being the only person in position to take action when lives hung in the balance. The hidden facility revealed itself gradually as Jack and Max worked their way closer, moving with the patient precision of hunters who understood that haste could mean disaster for both themselves and their potential rescue target. What had initially appeared to be a natural depression in the mountainside was actually a carefully camouflaged compound with multiple buildings constructed from materials that blended seamlessly with the surrounding forest environment. Jack counted at least 8 structures, including what appeared to be living quarters, storage facilities, and a larger building that dominated the center of the compound, like a headquarters or command post. The sophistication of the construction suggested this operation had been in place for months or possibly years, with resources and planning that went far beyond typical drug trafficking organizations. Max's behavior became increasingly agitated as they drew closer, his nose working constantly as he processed scents that told a story Jack could only guess at, though the dog's obvious distress suggested that at least one of those scents belonged to Maria Santos. Through careful observation, Jack identified the patrol patterns of the guards, noting their equipment, communication schedules, and the obvious military or paramilitary training that governed their movements. The leader of the operation became apparent as Jack watched a tall, bearded man emerge from the central building and address several subordinates with the authority and bearing of someone accustomed to command. Even at a distance, something about the man's posture and gestures reminded Jack of military contractors he had encountered during his service. Professionals who had taken their skills into the private sector, where moral boundaries became negotiable depending on the price offered. Max's focus intensified as the bearded man appeared, his body language shifting into a more aggressive stance that suggested the German Shepherd had identified this individual as the primary threat to whatever he was trying to protect. Jack's worst fears were confirmed when he spotted Maria Santos through his binoculars, bound and seated outside one of the smaller buildings under the watchful eye of 2 armed guards. Even from his concealed position, Jack could see that she was injured, her movements restricted, and her posture suggesting either physical trauma or extreme exhaustion from whatever ordeal she had endured since her capture. The sight triggered a flood of memories from Jack's military service, moments when the mission had suddenly become personal, when abstract tactical objectives had transformed into desperate efforts to save specific individuals whose faces would haunt him forever if he failed to act. Max seemed to sense Jack's emotional response, pressing closer to his side in a gesture of support that reminded Jack of the dog's uncanny ability to provide comfort during his darkest moments of post-traumatic stress. The German Shepherd's attention remained fixed on Maria's location, his body trembling slightly with barely contained energy that suggested he was ready to act the moment Jack gave the signal. Through continued observation, Jack began to piece together the routine of Maria's captivity, noting the guard rotation schedule, the times when she was allowed to move, and the security measures that surrounded her makeshift prison. The bearded leader, whom Jack had begun thinking of as the primary target, visited Maria's location twice during Jack's observation period, each time engaging in what appeared to be interrogation sessions that left Maria visibly shaken. Jack realized that time was running out, that whatever information the criminals wanted from Maria, they were growing impatient with her resistance, and that her continued survival depended on rescue efforts that couldn't wait for official help to arrive. The first direct confrontation came sooner than Jack had planned, when one of the guards deviated from his established patrol route and nearly stumbled upon their concealed observation position. Jack's hand instinctively moved to the knife on his belt, his military training calculating distances and angles of attack, while simultaneously hoping the situation could be resolved without violence that would alert the entire compound to their presence. Max sensed the immediate danger before Jack fully processed it, the German shepherd's body coiling like a spring as he prepared to defend his human partner from the approaching threat. The guard was young, probably inexperienced. His attention focused on his radio conversation rather than the professional surveillance that should have been his primary concern. And Jack realized this might be their only opportunity to gather intelligence without triggering a full alert. In a split-second decision that relied entirely on Max's training and instincts, Jack gave the silent signal for the German shepherd to neutralize the threat without causing serious injury, trusting in abilities that had been honed through countless hours of military training and real-world application. Max moved with the fluid precision of a predator, closing the distance to the guard in seconds and taking him down with a combination of weight, momentum, and perfectly applied pressure that rendered the man unconscious without permanent harm. Jack quickly secured the guard's weapons and radio equipment, while Max maintained a protective perimeter, both of them knowing that their window of opportunity had just become much smaller and that the stakes of their mission had escalated beyond simple reconnaissance. The guard's radio crackled with periodic check-ins from the central command, and Jack realized they had perhaps 15 minutes before the man's failure to respond would trigger a security alert that would make any rescue attempt exponentially more dangerous. Environmental dangers escalated their predicament as the storm clouds that had been gathering all morning finally released their burden in a sudden downpour that transformed the mountainside into a treacherous landscape of slippery rocks and rapidly flowing water. Jack's military experience had taught him that weather could be either ally or enemy depending on how it was utilized, and the storm provided both concealment for their movements and serious challenges to their mobility and communication. Max's thick coat provided natural protection from the elements, but his sensitive nose was less effective in the heavy rain, forcing them to rely more heavily on visual observation and tactical planning. The sound of rainfall masked their footsteps as they moved closer to Maria's location, but it also made it more difficult to hear approaching guards or detect changes in the compound's alert status. Jack noticed that the storm was affecting the criminals as well, with guards seeking shelter and communication between positions becoming more sporadic, creating opportunities that hadn't existed in the clear morning conditions. Lightning flashes provided brief moments of enhanced visibility, while simultaneously threatening to reveal their position to anyone who might be watching from the compound, forcing Jack to time their movements with the natural rhythm of the storm. Max adapted to the conditions with the resilience of a working dog, bred for adverse environments, his focus remaining entirely on their mission despite the discomfort and challenges posed by the weather. The rain also created new urgency for Maria's situation, as Jack could see that her outdoor captivity provided no shelter from the storm, and her already weakened condition would deteriorate rapidly under exposure to the elements. Through the rain-blurred view of his binoculars, Jack watched the bearded leader emerge from the central building and gesture angrily at Maria's guards, apparently displeased with their failure to move her to a more secure indoor location, suggesting that the criminal's timeline was accelerating in response to the changing conditions. The moment of truth arrived, as Jack spotted two guards moving Maria toward the central building, clearly intending to relocate her away from the storm, but also deeper into the compound where rescue would become exponentially more difficult. Jack's military training kicked into overdrive as he calculated angles of approach, timing windows, and the tactical advantages they could exploit in the next few minutes before the opportunity disappeared forever. Max seemed to understand the urgency without any verbal communication, his body language shifting into the focused intensity of a working dog preparing for action, every muscle coiled and ready for Jack's command. The rain provided excellent cover for their approach, but it also made the terrain more treacherous, requiring Jack to balance speed with caution as they moved down the slope toward the compound's perimeter. Jack used hand signals to direct Max toward a flanking position that would allow the German Shepherd to disable one guard, while Jack dealt with the other, a coordinated attack that relied entirely on their ability to work as a seamless team under extreme pressure. The first guard never knew what hit him as Max's 70-pound frame slammed into him from behind, the impact driving him to the ground, while the German Shepherd's training ensured the takedown was effective, but not lethal. Jack moved simultaneously, his military combat training allowing him to neutralize the second guard with a chokehold that rendered the man unconscious in seconds. Both guards taken down so quickly and quietly that Maria barely had time to register what was happening. The German Shepherd immediately moved to Maria's side, his gentle demeanor with the frightened woman a stark contrast to the controlled violence he had just displayed. His presence providing comfort while Jack cut her restraints and assessed her condition. Maria was weak but conscious, her eyes wide with fear and confusion until Jack identified himself and explained that they were there to help. His calm voice and professional manner helping to ground her in the reality of rescue rather than another phase of captivity. Vincent Cole's appearance in the doorway of the central building transformed the rescue operation into a direct confrontation as the bearded leader emerged with a pistol in his hand and rage burning in his eyes. Cole's military bearing became immediately apparent as he assessed the tactical situation with professional efficiency, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command as he ordered Jack to release Maria or face the consequences. The man's background revealed itself through his movements and speech patterns, clearly someone with extensive military or paramilitary experience who had chosen to use those skills in service of criminal enterprises rather than legitimate purposes. Jack found himself facing a psychological warfare situation as Cole began speaking about Jack's military service, revealing knowledge that could only have come from extensive research into anyone who might threaten their operation. Cole's words were calculated to undermine Jack's confidence, suggesting that his post-military struggles with PTSD made him unsuitable for the kind of high-stakes confrontation they now faced. Attempting to exploit vulnerabilities that only someone with intimate knowledge of veteran psychology would know to target. Max remained protectively close to Maria while simultaneously maintaining awareness of Cole's position, the German Shepherd's intelligence allowing him to understand that their situation had become significantly more dangerous with the arrival of the operation's leader. Cole's revelation that he knew about Jack's grandfather's connection to the land added a personal dimension to the confrontation, suggesting that the criminal operation had been deliberately targeting this specific area, partly because of its significance to the Morrison family. The psychological pressure intensified as Cole explained that Jack's grandfather had been an obstacle to their plans during his final years, asking too many questions about activities in the remote areas of his beloved mountains, and that his death had been convenient for their expansion efforts. Jack felt the familiar weight of responsibility that had defined his military service, the understanding that this moment would determine not just Maria's fate, but also the future of the wilderness area that had shaped his childhood and provided his refuge in adulthood. The confrontation erupted into physical violence as Cole attempted to use Maria as leverage, threatening to execute her unless Jack surrendered immediately and provided information about any backup forces that might be approaching their position. Jack's military training took over completely as he recognized Cole's desperation, understanding that the man had reached the point where he was willing to commit murder rather than risk exposure of his operation. Max demonstrated the remarkable intelligence that had made him such an effective military working dog by creating a diversion at the crucial moment, barking and moving in a pattern that drew Cole's attention away from Jack just long enough for the Marine veteran to close the distance between them. The fight that followed was brutal and professional. Two men with extensive combat training engaged in a struggle where the stakes were life and death, not just for them, but for Maria and potentially countless others who might fall victim to Cole's criminal enterprise. Jack's hand-to-hand combat skills, honed through years of military service and maintained through rigorous physical conditioning, proved equal to Cole's abilities as they grappled for control of the pistol that had become the focal point of their struggle. Max's contribution to the fight was decisive. The German Shepherd's ability to read the tactical situation, allowing him to intervene at precisely the right moments, disrupting Cole's attempts to gain advantage while avoiding actions that might endanger Jack in the close-quarters combat. The sound of their struggle echoed across the compound, and Jack knew that other guards would be converging on their position within minutes, making it essential to resolve the confrontation quickly and begin their escape before being overwhelmed by superior numbers. Cole's desperation grew as he realized his position was deteriorating, leading him to make increasingly reckless moves that Jack was able to exploit using techniques learned in countless training sessions and real-world applications during his military service. The environmental catastrophe struck without warning as the storm that had been building throughout the morning reached its peak intensity, unleashing a flash flood that transformed the natural depression housing the compound into a rapidly filling basin of churning water and debris. Jack's combat training had prepared him for many scenarios, but fighting for his life while simultaneously dealing with a natural disaster required adaptability and quick thinking that tested every skill he had ever learned. The rising water forced all parties to abandon their immediate conflicts in favor of basic survival, as the compound's buildings began flooding and the carefully constructed criminal infrastructure started collapsing under the assault of nature's fury. Cole's reaction to the flood revealed both his desperation and his fundamental inability to adapt to circumstances beyond his control, as he continued attempting to maintain dominance even as the ground literally shifted beneath their feet. Max proved invaluable during the crisis, his natural instincts for survival combining with his training to help guide all of them toward higher ground. Even as Jack struggled with the moral dilemma of whether to help the man who had been willing to kill Maria just minutes earlier. Maria's weakened condition made her evacuation from the flooding compound extremely challenging, requiring Jack to carry her while Max scouted the safest route through rising water and increasingly unstable terrain. The German Shepherd's ability to read environmental conditions saved their lives repeatedly, as he led them away from areas where the floodwaters were creating dangerous undertows or where weakened trees were threatening to fall. Cole's criminal associates appeared throughout the compound in various states of panic, some attempting to salvage equipment or contraband, while others simply fled for their lives as their carefully planned operation dissolved into chaos. Jack found himself in the surreal position of coordinating survival efforts for people who had been trying to kill him just moments before. His military training and basic human decency preventing him from abandoning even his enemies to die in the natural disaster that was consuming the mountainside. Max's true heroism emerged as the German Shepherd demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to navigate the treacherous conditions, finding safe passage through terrain that would have defeated human judgment alone. The dog's route-finding skills became the difference between life and death, as he led their group away from the most dangerous flood zones, while simultaneously avoiding areas where rock slides and falling trees posed additional threats to their survival. Jack watched in amazement as Max seemed to anticipate the flood's behavior, leading them to higher ground just moments before water levels rose to dangerous heights in areas they had recently occupied. The German Shepherd's protective instincts extended beyond just Jack and Maria to include several of Cole's men who found themselves trapped by rising water, demonstrating a moral clarity that transcended the human conflicts that had brought them all to this crisis point. Max's ability to maintain focus and purpose amid the chaos provided an anchor of stability that helped Jack make rational decisions despite the emotional and physical stress of their situation. The dog's communication with Jack became almost telepathic during the crisis, with subtle body language and positioning conveying crucial information about safe routes, dangerous conditions, and the location of other survivors who needed assistance. Cole's growing recognition of Max's capabilities led to a grudging respect for the German Shepherd's intelligence and dedication, even as his own position became increasingly desperate with each passing minute. The floodwaters continued rising throughout their evacuation efforts, transforming the mountain landscape into an alien environment where familiar landmarks disappeared under churning torrents and new dangers emerged with each shift in the water's flow. Jack's military experience with crisis management proved essential as he organized their survival efforts. But it was Max's natural wisdom and unshakable loyalty that ultimately saved them all from becoming victims of the environmental disaster that had consumed Cole's criminal enterprise. Cole's final desperate gambit came as they reached what appeared to be safety on a rocky outcropping above the flood zone, when the criminal leader attempted to take Maria hostage one last time in a bid to force Jack to help him escape, rather than face capture by the authorities who would surely follow. Jack's exhaustion from the day's events had not diminished his tactical awareness, and he recognized Cole's desperation as the action of a man who had lost everything and was willing to drag others down with him rather than accept defeat. Max's positioning during this final confrontation was perfect, the German Shepherd having anticipated Cole's likely moves and placed himself in a position to intervene effectively while minimizing risk to Maria or Jack. The struggle that followed was brief but intense, with Cole's desperation making him dangerous even as his strategic position continued to deteriorate with each passing moment. Jack's military training in hostage situations provided the framework for his response, but it was Max's perfectly timed intervention that created the opening Jack needed to neutralize Cole without risking Maria's life. The German Shepherd's attack was precisely calibrated, using exactly the amount of force necessary to disable Cole while avoiding lethal injury, demonstrating the remarkable control and judgment that had made Max such an effective military working dog. Cole's defeat came through a combination of his own poor decisions, the environmental conditions that had destroyed his operation, and the teamwork between Jack and Max that had proven superior to his criminal organization's resources and planning. As Cole was finally restrained and secured, Jack felt the familiar weight of mission completion that had defined so many operations during his military service. But this time, the satisfaction was personal as well as professional. Knowing that they had saved Maria and dealt a significant blow to the criminal enterprise that had been destroying his grandfather's beloved wilderness, Max's role in Cole's defeat was unmistakable. And even Cole himself seemed to recognize that he had been outmaneuvered not just by a skilled veteran, but by the remarkable intelligence and loyalty of a dog who had proven himself a true hero under the most extreme circumstances. The arrival of Pete Williams and the rescue team provided the official conclusion to what had begun as a simple morning hike, but had transformed into a complex rescue operation with implications reaching far beyond a single missing person case. Pete's amazement at the scene that greeted him was obvious, as the veteran ranger surveyed the flood damage, the scattered remains of the criminal compound, and the unlikely group of survivors that Jack and Max had managed to keep alive through the crisis. The rescue team's medical assessment of Maria revealed the extent of her ordeal, with injuries and exposure that could have proven fatal if the rescue had been delayed much longer, emphasizing how crucial Jack's decision to trust Max's instincts had been to her survival. Cole and his surviving associates were taken into custody with evidence that would ensure lengthy prison sentences. But more importantly, their capture had broken up a criminal network that had been causing environmental damage throughout the Cascade Wilderness for months or possibly years. Jack's detailed debriefing with Pete Williams revealed the full scope of what they had discovered, providing law enforcement with information that would lead to the shutdown of similar operations throughout the region and the restoration of damaged wilderness areas. Max's behavior throughout the debriefing was calm and professional, the German Shepherd seeming to understand that their mission was complete and that the immediate danger had passed. Though he remained protectively close to both Jack and Maria throughout the medical evaluations and official interviews, the environmental impact of the criminal operation became clear as investigators surveyed the damage, with chemical contamination, habitat destruction, and illegal construction that would require years of restoration work to fully address. Pete Williams's admiration for both Jack and Max was evident as he described their actions to his superiors, emphasizing how the partnership between veteran and dog had accomplished what would have required a full tactical team under normal circumstances. The media attention that followed focused appropriately on the environmental crimes that had been stopped and the heroic rescue of Maria Santos. But Jack was most proud of the recognition that Max received for his crucial role in every aspect of their successful mission. The community response to news of the rescue operation highlighted the deep connections between environmental protection, veteran issues, and the special bonds that exist between humans and working animals. Local environmental groups rallied to support the restoration efforts that would be needed to repair the damage caused by Cole's criminal enterprise, while veteran organizations took pride in Jack's actions as an example of how military training and values could be applied to civilian challenges. Max became something of a celebrity among military working dog advocates, his story serving as a powerful example of the intelligence, loyalty, and capability that these animals bring to their partnerships with human handlers. Maria's recovery proceeded smoothly, and her gratitude to both Jack and Max was expressed through her decision to continue her environmental research with a specific focus on protecting wilderness areas from criminal exploitation. The scientific data that Maria had been collecting before her kidnapping proved crucial to understanding the full extent of environmental damage throughout the region, providing baseline information that would guide restoration efforts for years to come. Jack found himself invited to speak at veteran events and environmental conferences about the experience, though he always insisted that Max deserved equal billing for any recognition they received. The partnership between Jack and Max had been tested under the most extreme circumstances possible and had proven stronger than either of them could have imagined, deepening their bond in ways that would influence every aspect of their future together. Pete Williams's offer of a volunteer position with the Forest Service provided Jack with a new sense of purpose that connected his military experience with his love for the wilderness, while Max's proven abilities opened doors for additional training opportunities that would enhance their effectiveness as a team. The story of their rescue mission spread throughout the veteran community, inspiring other former service members to consider how their skills and experiences could be applied to civilian challenges, particularly in partnership with the working animals who had served alongside them in military operations. The long-term implications of Jack and Max's heroic actions extended far beyond the immediate rescue of Maria Santos, creating ripple effects that would influence environmental protection efforts, veteran services, and human-animal partnerships for years to come. The criminal network's destruction led to the discovery of similar operations throughout the western United States, with law enforcement agencies using information gathered from Cole's compound to break up a multi-state organization that had been causing environmental damage on a massive scale. Jack's decision to trust Max's instincts had prevented not just Maria's death, but potentially the expansion of criminal activities that could have caused irreparable harm to wilderness areas throughout the region. The environmental restoration project that followed became a model for similar efforts nationwide, demonstrating how criminal environmental damage could be reversed through coordinated efforts between government agencies, scientific organizations, and volunteer groups. Max's role in the rescue earned him recognition from military working dog organizations, with his story being used to illustrate the ongoing value of these remarkable animals even after their formal service has ended. The partnership between Jack and Max evolved into something resembling a professional working relationship, with their proven abilities leading to opportunities to assist in other wilderness protection and rescue operations throughout the Pacific Northwest. Maria's research, enhanced by her first-hand experience with environmental criminals, became instrumental in developing new strategies for detecting and preventing similar crimes in protected wilderness areas. The psychological impact on Jack was profound and positive, as the successful mission provided him with a sense of purpose and accomplishment that helped address some of the lingering effects of his post-military adjustment challenges. Pete Williams's Forest Service team gained 2 valuable volunteers whose unique combination of military training, wilderness knowledge, and interspecies communication had proven effective under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. The story of their rescue mission became a source of inspiration for other veterans struggling with post-service adjustment, demonstrating how military skills and values could be channeled into meaningful civilian contributions that served both personal healing and community benefit. The weeks following the rescue brought profound changes to everyone involved, with Maria's recovery serving as both a testament to human resilience and a catalyst for environmental protection efforts that would honor the sacrifice and courage displayed during that terrifying day in the mountains. Maria's physical injuries healed relatively quickly under medical care, but the psychological impact of her ordeal required more time and support, which Jack and Max provided through regular visits that helped ground her recovery in the positive outcome their actions had achieved. Her decision to continue environmental research took on new dimensions as she incorporated her first-hand experience with environmental criminals into academic work that would influence policy and enforcement strategies nationwide. Pete Williams's offer of volunteer positions with the Forest Service provided both Jack and Max with official recognition of their capabilities and a structured way to continue protecting the wilderness areas that had become central to their shared sense of purpose. Jack's new role involved training other rangers and volunteers in tactical awareness and crisis response, sharing military-derived skills that could help prevent future environmental crimes and improve rescue operations in remote areas. Max's proven abilities in search and rescue, threat detection, and wilderness navigation made him an invaluable addition to the Forest Service team, with his story inspiring the development of new programs pairing veterans with working dogs in conservation roles. Maria's research expanded to include collaboration with law enforcement agencies, using her scientific expertise to help develop better methods for detecting environmental crimes before they could cause significant damage to protected ecosystems. The friendship that developed between Jack, Max, and Maria represented something deeper than simple gratitude, evolving into a partnership based on shared values and complementary skills that enhanced all their individual efforts to protect the natural world. Pete Williams became not just their supervisor, but a mentor who helped Jack translate military leadership experience into civilian conservation work, while recognizing Max's unique contributions as essential to their team's effectiveness. The environmental restoration project that emerged from their discovery of Cole's operation became a model for similar efforts nationwide, demonstrating how rapid response to environmental crimes could minimize long-term damage and restore damaged ecosystems more effectively than traditional approaches. Jack's personal transformation through the experience represented a fundamental shift from post-military searching to post-military purpose, with the partnership between him and Max evolving into something that gave meaning and direction to both their lives in ways that neither could have achieved alone. The confidence and sense of accomplishment that came from their successful mission helped address many of the psychological challenges that had plagued Jack since leaving military service, providing concrete evidence that his skills and experiences could make positive contributions to civilian life. Max's behavior reflected his human partner's improved mental state, with the German Shepherd displaying increased confidence and enthusiasm for their work together, as if he too understood that they had found their true calling in protecting both people and places that needed their unique capabilities. Their new role as wilderness protection volunteers allowed Jack to apply military strategic thinking to conservation challenges, developing innovative approaches to patrol techniques, threat assessment, and emergency response that enhanced the Forest Service's effectiveness throughout the region. The grandfather's legacy that had initially drawn Jack to the mountains took on new meaning as he realized that his work with Max was continuing the old man's commitment to protecting the natural world, but with tools and techniques that the previous generation could never have imagined. Jack's speaking engagements at veteran events became opportunities to encourage other former service members to consider how their military training could be applied to environmental protection, creating a bridge between veteran services and conservation organizations that benefited both communities. Max's story resonated particularly strongly with other veterans who had served with military working dogs, inspiring several to explore similar partnerships in civilian conservation work, and helping to expand the network of veteran dog teams working in wilderness protection roles. The psychological healing that came from their shared sense of purpose was evident in Jack's improved sleep patterns, reduced anxiety levels, and renewed enthusiasm for outdoor activities that had once been sources of stress rather than enjoyment. Pete Williams observed the transformation with professional satisfaction, noting how the combination of meaningful work, clear purpose, and continued partnership with Max had addressed psychological challenges that traditional veteran services had struggled to resolve. Their success story became a case study in veteran transition programs, demonstrating how military skills could be channeled into civilian roles that provided both personal fulfillment and community benefit, while maintaining the partnerships with working animals that had been central to many veterans' military experience. The community recognition ceremony held 6 months after the rescue provided an opportunity to celebrate not just Jack and Max's heroic actions, but also the broader principles of environmental stewardship, veteran service, and human-animal partnerships that their story represented. The event drew attendees from throughout the Pacific Northwest, including environmental scientists, veteran organizations, law enforcement officials, and conservation groups who had been inspired by the rescue story and its aftermath. Jack's speech focused on the importance of trusting both human instincts and animal intelligence, emphasizing how Max's behavior that morning had been the key to everything that followed, from Maria's rescue to the dismantling of the criminal network that had been threatening wilderness areas throughout the region. Max's presence on stage during the ceremony created one of the event's most memorable moments, as the German Shepherd's calm dignity and obvious bond with Jack provided a powerful visual representation of the partnership that had made their success possible. Maria's presentation of her ongoing research demonstrated how the rescue had catalyzed scientific work that would have lasting impact on environmental protection efforts, with her data already being used to develop new detection methods for environmental crimes in protected areas. Pete Williams's remarks highlighted how Jack and Max had transformed from volunteers into essential members of the Forest Service team, with their unique capabilities contributing to successful operations throughout their first year of service. The ceremony also recognized the broader network of people who had contributed to the rescue's success, from the search teams who had provided backup support to the medical personnel who had ensured Maria's full recovery from her ordeal. The grandfather's legacy was acknowledged through the announcement of a new wilderness protection program named in his honor, with Jack and Max serving as the inaugural team in an initiative that would pair veterans with working dogs in conservation roles throughout the national forest system. Local school children who attended the ceremony were particularly fascinated by Max, whose story became part of their environmental education curriculum and inspired several to consider careers in conservation or veterinary medicine. The media coverage of the event emphasized the positive outcomes that had emerged from what began as a criminal conspiracy, showcasing how individual courage and partnership could create lasting change that benefited entire communities and ecosystems. The quiet moment that concluded their remarkable journey came as Jack and Max returned to the trail where their adventure had begun, this time not as a veteran seeking solace and his faithful companion, but as protectors of the wilderness who understood that their most important mission was just beginning. The familiar path looked different now, marked not just by memories of that crucial morning when Max had refused to move, but by the knowledge that their decision to trust each other had saved lives and protected an entire ecosystem from criminal destruction. Jack paused at the exact spot where Max had first frozen, recognizing it now as the moment when their partnership had evolved from companionship into something approaching destiny. When a dog's instincts and a veteran's willingness to trust those instincts had set in motion events that would define the rest of their lives together. Max's behavior on this return visit was relaxed and confident, his tail wagging as he explored familiar scents while remaining alert to his surroundings. The perfect balance of enjoyment and professional readiness that characterized his approach to all their work together. The view from the ridge that had once revealed Cole's criminal operation now showed the early signs of environmental restoration, with native vegetation beginning to reclaim areas that had been damaged by illegal activities, proof that their actions had created lasting positive change. Jack's reflection on the experience encompassed not just the dramatic rescue and confrontation, but the deeper realization that his post-military mission involved protecting the places and principles that gave meaning to both his service and his civilian life. The bond between them had been tested under the most extreme circumstances imaginable and had emerged stronger, deeper, and more purposeful than either of them could have anticipated when they first began hiking these trails together. As they prepared to begin another patrol of their expanded territory, Jack felt the same sense of mission readiness that had characterized his military service, but now enhanced by the wisdom that comes from finding one's true calling through partnership, service, and the courage to trust in something greater than oneself. Max's steady presence beside him represented not just companionship, but partnership in the truest sense, a shared commitment to protecting both the wilderness they loved and the people who needed their help, whether they knew it or not. The story that had begun with 5 seconds of a dog's refusal to move had become a testament to the power of trust, the value of military training applied to civilian service, and the remarkable capabilities that emerge when humans and animals work together toward a common purpose that serves something greater than their individual interests. If you're listening to this story from somewhere in our beautiful country, we'd love to hear about the loyal companions who have shaped your own journey, whether they walk on 2 legs or 4. The bond between veterans and their service animals represents something sacred in our society, a partnership built on mutual trust, shared sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty that continues long after formal military service has ended. We encourage you to share your own stories of loyalty, courage, and the unexpected moments when trusting your instincts, or those of a faithful companion, led to outcomes you never could have imagined. Please consider supporting organizations that provide service animals to veterans, protect our wilderness areas from environmental crime, or help former military personnel find new purpose through meaningful civilian service that utilizes their unique skills and experiences. Our next story will explore another remarkable partnership between a veteran and his four-legged battle buddy, this time involving a retired Navy SEAL and his explosive detection dog, who discover that their civilian mission of protecting school children from danger is just beginning when they uncover a threat that reaches far beyond anything they faced in military service. To all the veterans listening, and to the families who support them, thank you for your service, your sacrifice, and your continued commitment to protecting the values and places that make our country worth defending.